Dec Munro, welcome. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks, you.
Yeah, cool. And a shout to Coke, who is online now, watching this live as a Platinum patron for the introduction as well. Or the recommendation, I should say.
Thanks, Coke.
Here we are. Yeah, thanks, Coke. Okay, so Coke said to me, I said it twice now, which means he's keen to me to ask you about this. The knitted arsehole story. What is the knitted arsehole story? Why is he so enthusiastic about the knitted arsehole?
Hi, Coke. First off, hope you're doing okay health-wise. And the knitted arsehole story, I teach stand-up comedy, and I teach primarily intensive courses now. So an intensive course is 5 days, Monday to Friday, and then a showcase at the weekend. I do a chat at the start of the intensive courses, basically saying comedy doesn't have rules and shouldn't have rules, but I'm teaching and I get to make some, and let's make the world a slightly better place. So I feel like we're going to try not to do it. There's going to be no racism, no sexism. Let's avoid the isms and let's be kind. And so I gave this kind of speech at one particular course about a year ago now, and a woman was in the group. The groups are about 15 people or so. She's in the group. Before the course, before it had started, she turned up. I co-own and co-founded a venue called the Bill Murray, which is a comedy venue in Islington. It has amazing acts that come through it. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had Nish Kumar, we've got Kevin Bridges, we had Catherine Ryan a couple of weeks ago. We've had all kinds of really, really good performers. Sarah Pascoe, a little bit further away. So lots of good people coming very, very regularly. And it's called the Bill Murray, and it's called the Bill Murray because we thought it would be funny to name it the Bill Murray.
So he hasn't endorsed it?
No. Legally, it's named after the second Earl of Dyser, who happened to be called William Murray, and was a whipping boy, which is an official title in the court of Charles II. And so we've got a little note that says, break glass in case of Bill Murray. And it says, Dear Bill Murray, you may have noticed there are loads of pictures of you around the venue. They're entirely coincidental with us calling it the Bill Murray. We'd like you to be our Bill Murray. Instead, at the moment, it's the second Earl of Dyser, who is the Bill Murray that it's legally named after. We thought Bill Murray would sue us, and we'd then go through the Ghostbusters, and it would be a good PR stunt. So it's called the Bill Murray. She turned up. She was an older lady. She had a picture of her with Bill Murray leaning on a very cool car. And she said that she'd been to a film brought along by a friend that Bill Murray was recording, and Bill Murray had hit on her. And she said, so here's a photograph of me and Bill Murray. Oh, this is amazing. I thought, this is incredible. What an amazing coincidence, or how cool she's taking the course. She then said, anyone I think I'm going to really like, I give a gift to. And I was like, oh that's so nice. It's sometimes, because I'm the teacher, sometimes students will give me a gift, like a bar of chocolate, or today somebody brought me an Americano, which was very nice. And she said, what I give to everybody, I think I'm going to really get on with and like, is a knitted arsehole. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, that's right. A knitted, the hole in the middle of your arse, a knitted arsehole. I brought you a knitted arsehole. And she took out pink with a brown thing in the middle, a small knitted. I wouldn't have known it was an arsehole or a rectum with the whatever, but that's what it was. And she gave it to me. And then she stood back.
Made of what?
It was knitted. So it was made
knitted.
of
knitted, right.
Yeah,
so it's
wool, I guess.
Okay. Right.
Whatever you knit things from, wool, I think. So she gave it to me.
In my head, then I had an actual animal's rectum that she'd knitted together. That's what I was thinking. This was a freak.
I mean, that is not out of the realm of possibility. That was probably her plan B, to be honest. Or maybe she'd run out of that version. So she gave me this small knitted arsehole, but then she stood back and just stared at me. I've never been given a knitted arsehole in my life before, nor a gift like that. And I didn't really know how to react. And then she said, Bill Murray really liked his? And I was like, I don't know that he did. I'm not sure Bill Murray loved that, but maybe he did. So I said, thank you very much. And she said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I'll carry it in my wallet. And I did. I carried it for about a year, and then my wallet got stolen. But I carried it all the time, and I'd bring it out on courses. And Coke was part of one of the courses, and I told that story. The other thing, the sort of addenda to that, is I say this chat at the start of the course. No sexism, no racism. I then get them all to come up, and they do a small exercise to kind of introduce themselves. This person was the first person to introduce herself. She's a white American woman from the Deep South, and she stood up on stage, an older lady, she stood up on stage in front of people she'd never met before, having given me a knitted arsehole, and told arguably the single most racist story I've ever heard in my entire life. And her point was she didn't understand why she could use certain bits of language that are not okay for people who are not of that ethnicity to use, but she kept repeating the words. She was like, I don't understand why I can't use this word. I don't understand why I can't use this word. This was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been teaching for 4 years. It's the weirdest thing ever.
That's the height of what was it? The
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
It was a bit after Black Lives Matter.
That was just after the peak of it, right?
Yeah.
My God.
But it was still like,
Brilliant.
we were all aware of it, and it's been important for a long time. That's why I start the courses and I've always done it by saying it. But it was such a power move because I was like, please don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then she came on and did the worst version of one of those things I've ever seen in my entire life on or off stage. Yeah.
So you don't want that kind of comedy in the workshops or the courses. Does that mean you're against it where comedy is concerned?
That's an interesting
We were
question.
talking about Richard Pryor,
Yeah.
Off air, and we were talking about Robin Williams off air,
Yeah.
and there are comedians today who, a core parts of a lot of the premises they do is racism, is sexism, and those things have been around for a long time, right?
Aren't they, to my mind, the majority of them are discussing like social issues. They're probably not using specific language. And so I would say, for me, don't be racist is don't say a racist epithet about somebody of that ethnicity, whereas talking about racism, like structural inequality and stuff, is something that a lot of comedians speak to, I think. So can you talk about larger societal issues within comedy? Absolutely. And the most interesting comedy often does. If you're going to talk about being of one ethnicity and if you're going to use slurs that are around that ethnicity, I feel like the only way you can do that is if you are of that ethnicity, right?
But if there's only one specific example I can think that is the N word. Were you talking about black people?
I guess there's the P word when you're talking about. I think there's lots of different.
The P word when you're talking about?
Don't make me say it.
No,
This is not a thing I'm going to say.
When you're talking about what?
When you're talking about people from maybe Pakistan.
Oh, the P word. Oh,
I
okay.
guess,
Well, yeah.
There's
sorry.
a shorten for if you're
Yeah.
talking
Okay, get
about
it.
people who
So,
are Asian,
okay.
if you're talking about people who are Chinese, then there's a.
But what about playing on stereotypes?
In what sense?
There's a stereotype that black people all like fried chicken.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know.
There's a stereotype played on, for example. Obviously, it's not true.
I don't know. What's the example that you? What are you suggesting?
Well, so I guess I'm trying to understand what you are okay with in terms of what can be used in comedy and what not, and what you define as not what you define in, but I get not using certain words which would be extremely offensive to use if you're not of that. If you're not, the N word again, prime example. You wouldn't want a white comedian or a non-black comedian using that word. It would be viewed as extremely offensive. But are playing on stereotypes to do with different types of people, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultures, different creeds. Is that a problem?
Is it a problem? Well, I'm teaching a beginner's comedy course, right? And
Yeah.
so I feel like what you need to do on a beginner's comedy course, I direct shows, I do all kinds of stuff, and then it's slightly different. But in a beginner's comedy course, you're coming to comedy for the first time. Are you at a point where you can confidently hold an argument on stage and make it funny? Maybe. Do you need to think about, how to hold a mic, how to engage an audience, how to be confident in your presentation, what your comedic persona might be, how to nuance, how to add extra jokes to something you're saying? I think all of those things are important. And then maybe once you've figured out or got closer to making a decision on what your comedic persona is, i.e. how you come across to an audience and what's funny about that and how you lean into it or lean away from it for comic effect, once you've done that, then you can maybe start thinking, what are the larger arguments I want to talk to or speak to? I'm not in the business of setting rules, and I think a lot of great comedy is about transgression, right? It's about this is the line and I'm passing the line. But what you want to feel is that the person who's doing that is in control of where they're coming from. They need to be able to give you their perspective on the world in order that you understand whether or not they know it's transgression, to what extent it's deliberate or not, and therefore how funny they can be around it. I wouldn't set rules for anyone. I do it in a beginner's comedy course because it's a diverse set of group of people, and you can accidentally offend people and then feel like there was somebody today in the course who did a joke that was taking the reverse attitude on school shootings in America.
Oh, Christ.
And the course...
Was the reverse attitude saying it's a good idea?
No.
For some reason.
The reverse attitude was saying, in essence, the numbers are fairly low as an average, right? So X is the amount of school shootings, and the actual total number, very sadly, of deaths is Y. And they were speaking honestly from their reaction, and they were looking to find the comedy in it.
What's the problem kind of thing? It's pretty low, relatively speaking.
What they were saying was the average amount of deaths in school shootings is about 1.7. Given that the targets are soft targets, that's not as high as somebody might expect, right? That was their and the whole point of the course is people can try stuff out. But what was great about it was that the entirety of the group were just like, we're not comfortable with you making this joke. We're not comfortable with the world of it. And I sat down with the person and said, look, we're not going to talk about that topic again because we've all learned as a group that this group are not at a point that we're comfortable with that. And I don't know that you can be comfortable with making that into comedy until you've got 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And even then, I don't know if it's a reasonable subject for comedy. And
there's very few people who can be successful with it like that, right? I think and they probably developed it at a later stage, like you say. I mean, Frankie Boyle's a great example. Ricky Gervais is a great example.
Frankie Boyle does a thing where he says something really horribly offensive and then he laughs after it. And what he's doing in laughing at it is giving us permission to laugh at it as well. But he's also laughing at it as though he's shocked by the thing he said. So he's got a kind of
ridiculousness of it. Yeah.
He's got a performative tick that basically says to us, this is ridiculous, I'm doing comedy. He's learned that at some point in his stellar career. And so, am I here to set rules? Yes, in a beginner's course, because I want to make sure that everyone's taken care of and looked after, and I don't want experiences like that happen. I've taught this for 4 years. That experience has probably happened twice. Once when the individual I mentioned to you, who gave me the bum gift, did her thing, and we then agreed that she'd leave the course, and she got a refund. And once today. And that person's actually lovely and apologized to the whole group and realized that they maybe taken it too far and made a mistake. But you want people to discover that, but you don't want to set full. I'm not saying that there aren't comedians out there who can make jokes about particular ethnicities or whatever. I am saying that you have to know who you are. You have to be intentional about it. And if you're going to take big risks in upsetting an audience, then you really have to have the experience to know that that's what might happen, and hopefully the sense to take care of the audience around it.
There are different expectations. So I suppose there are different expectations for a person walking onto one of your courses in what they may end up being an audience member, a spectator of the type of comedy. There's different expectations for them compared to someone who's walking into a comedy club to receive comedy. A person walking into a comedy club to receive comedy is expecting, well, they don't know what to expect. I suppose you have to go in there with a pretty open mind and go, oh, there could be hit with anything here. I need to have, there may be something I'm not going to like, but hey, we're in a comedy club, this may happen.
Yeah.
Whereas a person walking into your course is there to learn. And so maybe their threshold for what they will and won't accept in terms of entertainment in the spirit of learning is different. And also, is there a risk that people try and go for the easy win, the easy laugh by being bold and outrageous? And this would work great, and they, in terms of learning how to be a comedian, and that means they avoid the finer skills and the intricacies of everything that makes a comedian funny, other than the words coming out of their mouth.
Absolutely, yes. That's a brilliant way of describing it. I think we can mistake the kind of laugh that comes with being shocked with the laugh that comes with this is funny, and it's a bit Godwin's law in open mic comedy, not on the courses, but that idea that kind of I think Godwin's law is on the internet.
Godwin's law,
on the internet. in any debate, someone will bring up Hitler very quickly. I think that's the sort of summary of what that law is. And I think that, like an open mic comedy, there are certain things that people will say to get a shocked reaction. And they can mistake that for a laugh rather than an actual laugh, if that makes sense. Like you and I can say something shocking, we'll get a response from an audience. We might well think that that's them laughing, or we might well think that them being entertained, but it's actually them being like, whoa, we didn't realise somebody would actually say that.
Know your audience, right?
Yeah, or be aware that what you're giving out is not necessarily what they're receiving, or what you think you're giving out is not what they're receiving, which can be the same as know your audience, but sometimes it's a different thing, I think.
So what you got you into this in the first place? How are you, how are you doing what you do now? You're director of a comedy club?
Yes, I'm a co-founder.
Co-founder as well?
Co-founder, co-owner of this comedy club, the Bill Murray.
You teach comedy?
I do teach it, yeah.
Why did you get into it yourself? How did you get into it?
I got into it. I was in a university comedy club, and I really liked doing stand-up.
Where was that?
Cambridge University.
Oh.
And after that, I've always loved comedy, and I sort of went there because they've got this history of comedy. And
what's your earliest memory of a comedian, watching a comedian stand-up?
Listening to it, it's my dad playing me Monty Python records and thinking they were the funniest thing around. And my dad doing impressions of Monty Python. I can't remember my earliest memory of seeing comedy. I don't know what it would have been.
My dad, from one of my birthdays, I wasn't, maybe I was a teenager, I was an older teenager. I think I might have been in the military at the time, actually. He gave me a CD of, I said CD like that's old. I remember cassettes, though. Maybe 8 tracks of Derek and Clive.
Oh yes,
Remember
so
Derek
good.
And Clive,
worst job I ever had.
Yeah, so good.
That was the second thing that my dad got me into.
Always
it was amazing.
hammered. They were always. I think they were always. He told me they were always pissed when they recorded this, and they just started off as a laugh, and they just see what, and these random conversations, that random stuff, imagination running wild. Derek and Clive. Yeah, that's my earliest.
There are on YouTube. There are videos of the recording sessions.
No way.
Go and treat yourself and watch some of them.
I will do. Yeah.
You can tell how hammered they are.
Who are they doing it? Who are the comedians?
Peter Cook and Dudley Moore.
That's right. That's
Derek
right.
and Clive or Peter.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so that's your earliest memory. All right. So you must have. So where did you go after the? In fact, now what was comedy club in Cambridge like? What was that scene like? Was it a structured thing? Was it set up by with the uni, or was it some of the students set up?
So it's been around for a long time. It's a sort of student thing, but it's been there for a very, very long time. And there's a little group that at the time sort of ran it. And every year that changes. And it's mostly sketch comedy, but there's also some stand-up. And you have like one particular place to perform it. And I guess now it would be very competitive, and at the time it was a little bit competitive, but it was they had a tradition where everyone who wanted to, pretty much, in the first show of the year, got to perform up to 3 minutes of either a sketch or stand-up. And then they kind of...
In the first show of the year?
The first show.
How many shows are there? Well, then?
One every 2 weeks.
Quite a lot.
Yeah, really, really a lot. And the venue there is like a 200-seat theatre. So you get, it's 11 o'clock at night, you get drunken students watching you. They mostly want you to do well because they're either friends of friends or whatever. So it's their most supportive environment. And it's sort of, in the same way that the showcase is on the course, you do a showcase at the end, they kind of fool me into thinking, oh, everyone's going to love this. It's the same at any university venue. If you're performing to people who are your friends and your age, it's not the same as performing to somebody who gets none of the references, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
So how long were you there for?
3 years.
And you got into the comedy as soon as you got there?
I was intimidated in the first year, so I played football with my mates in my little sort of college. And I went along to one meeting and then didn't go back. And then in the second year, I went along and forced myself to stay a part of it. And then I became a member of the sort of group that ran it relatively quickly. And so for my third year, I was on that at the end of my second year, all of my third year was on that little group where you kind of have meetings and make sort of little decisions, not big decisions, things like what kind of poster are we going to put on the wall, that sort of stuff.
But what was driving you to be a part of it? So
I love comedy.
And you must have thought you were funny as well, or could do it.
Don't know. I think I was a little
it takes
bit funny.
a lot of balls, as we mentioned, I think early on in the podcast on the icebreaker. It takes a lot of balls to step in to do anything, any kind of public speaking. And I'd argue comedy must be one of the hardest to do. You're not merely delivering information; you're merely delivering information and trying to drive a response that is there and then and obvious. Laughter, positive response, right?
Yes. You've done public speaking.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I feel fine if I know what the objective is.
Okay, cool.
I feel fine.
So that's the military training to a degree.
Yeah.
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 So I think that's the thing. It's about gamifying it. It's about figuring out, what do I want? If I'm doing a 5-minute set, or if I'm doing a long speech, or if I'm doing a whatever, what's the objective and how do I get there and how is this going to make me better at the thing? And setting achievable goals. There's a very famous quote from Jerry Seinfeld, the American comedian. He said, at a funeral, most people in America, the number one fear for people in America is public speaking. The number 2 is death. So at a funeral, you are better off in the casket than you are making the speech. Right? And isn't that probably true for most people? They'd rather be dead than actually speaking in front of a group of people. Yeah. But when you think about it, kind of what's the worst that's going to happen? So I don't know that I thought I was wildly funny, but I think I thought I had some funny ideas, and maybe some people that I thought were great. I had a history of performing on that stage, or I really liked, Robin Williams or whoever it might be, and there were lots of people who'd gone on to become stand-ups, having performed at a relatively early age. So I just thought, I'll give it a go. Didn't think I was great.
Did you? So apart from those sort of fortnightly shows that you're taking part in, what was your first longer, more significant set that you did, and where was it?
I did 2 shows at that venue that were kind of 3 or 4 nights long, with a friend who is now a professor of dinosaurs at another university, another friend who's an editor, and the 3 of us did our little show. And the dinosaur professor, Roger, who's lovely but way smarter than almost anyone I've ever met, did these jokes that even now I still don't fully understand. And I'd say about 20 of the people in any audience did understand, but they were very good for those 20. And I did some jokes that were unimaginative, and I've subsequently discovered were derivative, if not basically the same as better, smarter people, and then some pretty good jokes. So yeah, we did an hour, and I mostly have incredibly fond memories of doing it with 2 good people.
Oh, good. When did you switch away from performing yourself to being more off stage, backstage?
In 2015, my friend Sophie Hagen, a Danish comedian, asked me to. She said, "I can't imagine taking my first show to the Edinburgh Fringe, which happens in August every year and is kind of the cultural melting pot of the UK, arguably, and the biggest fringe festival or arts festival in the world."
I have a shameful thing to admit. I did not know what the Edinburgh Fringe consisted of until I spoke to Joshua.
Well, that's not shameful.
I didn't know what it was. I did not have a clue. I don't know. I heard about it. I thought, God, I got to get up there. Got to get up there to that for a couple of weeks.
You spent a career defending this country. It's fine for you to not know, what clowns do in August. That's
Different
fine.
Kind of comedy. Different kind of comedy.
Yeah, so that's what it is. And a lot of comedy that we then go on to see in films or big shows comes out of the Edinburgh Fringe in one way or another. For example, Baby Reindeer, which is not comedy, started off at the Edinburgh Fringe. Fleabag started off at the Edinburgh Fringe, and the 2 most famous things recently.
In how? In what way? I've not seen either, by the way, but in what way?
Baby Reindeer was a live show at the Fringe. Richard Gant did a live
comedy
show. No. It's a very dark piece, but it's theatre, and it started at the Fringe. And Fleabag is arguably comedy theatre, but it was sort of presented as theatre, but it's very funny. And that was a 1-person, 1-hour show.
So Edinburgh Fringe isn't exclusively about comedy?
No, Edinburgh Fringe, it started out being about theatre until about 1947. And then they had the Fringe, which was essentially people from a comedy background wanting to go to the Edinburgh Fringe and perform there, and being told, no, you can't be a part of the official Fringe. And so they set up the Edinburgh Fringe, which then became comedy and is now way bigger than everything else that happens there. And so the Edinburgh Fringe, as we know it, has really only existed, I think, since about 1950 something or other. So 70 years.
How did we get onto that subject then?
you asked me after I said that comedy, that you didn't know so much about the Edinburgh Fringe, and I mentioned that there's stuff outside of comedy that happens there, and you asked me about theatre shows, and I mentioned shows that had broken out from the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yeah, they got into the Fringe bit now. Oh, that's right. I asked how you got from on stage to backstage.
Yeah, so I directed the show so Sophie said, I can't imagine taking my first show without you. And I said, oh, great, thinking she'd realised I'd be a good comedy director. She hadn't. She thought I'd be a good flyer. So flyer is when you hand out flyers to people to get them to come to shows. I said, would you mind if I also directed the show? And I'll flyer for you, but can I direct? And she said, if you have to. And the show then went to the Fringe and won a prize. And that meant that other people asked me to help them with their shows.
And you preferred that than performing yourself?
Yeah, a little. I mean, I love teaching and I love directing. I absolutely love it. And I know that I'm really good at it. And I think I possibly could be good at stand-up, but it would take a lot of hard work now to get there. And I really enjoy sitting there helping people and then saying, now you do the work. And they go off and do the sort of hard work, I guess. But I don't think there are many people who do the job that I do. And I utterly, utterly love it. So now I guess, because I help a lot of people, some of them relatively well known with shows or with performances or with speeches or whatever, to go out and learn to be good at stand-up whilst maybe having them in a green room watching me, and they've maybe asked me for my advice, and to go and be bad, because everyone has to be bad. There's a,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think, it's also, I mean, it also seems to be an incredible amount of hard work. It's all, I think, correct if I'm wrong, but the easiest bit may well be getting on stage to deliver a new set. The hardest part maybe getting to the point where you've got a set finished. And I was thinking about this a few months back actually, and I was thinking I could probably go and be funny for like 2 minutes, and I was thinking, but could I replicate it? Yeah, I could do it again, but could I come up with something different every time? I thought that is horrendous. Just for a few minutes, something different that you think is going to be, so it's come up with something different and come up with something different you think is going to be funny. And then doing that, delivering a different hour every year or whatever, whatever the cadence needs to be when you're at that level. It's unbelievably difficult, I think. I don't know. But then, I can't imagine it comes that naturally to everyone. Like being funny and being able to, having great timing and coming up with, interesting premises and just interesting ideas probably is quite common, right? Relatively common. Not common. Yeah, relatively common, I think, amongst people. We know lots and lots of funny people, right? But being able to convert that into a professional thing and still maintain that ability to be fucking hilarious must be extremely difficult.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that if you did come up with 2 minutes of funny stuff, you wouldn't have to come up with two new minutes. You could do that 2 minutes a lot. And maybe what you'd do is you do that 10 or 20 or 30 times, and you'd figure out where the pauses sit and how to maybe do sort of performance things each time. And often the fact that you know a set allows you to then find the comedy in it. So you wouldn't be that every time you performed, you have to come up with new material. In fact, if you do that, I think you're making your life way harder for yourself. Because often it's when you really know something that you can act it out, and it seems like it's coming from the top of your head, not you're trying to remember something. You're most funny generally if you know it, and then you can perform it as though you don't know it, as though it's coming to you in the moment. But you have to really know it well to be able to do that.
So how do you teach your students, or how do you help them work out and find new things to talk about, to be funny about? Like,
sure. So I think for material generation,
if they get the equivalent of writer's block, for example,
I think for material generation, often what you're thinking is like go back to maybe your own personal biography. So what's interesting about you, or what do you have a strong opinion about? An example of that, I directed a UK comedian called Ellie Taylor, she's on Ted Lasso, and she's been on, she's presented a bunch of different shows. She's great. She's a really lovely, talented human being. And she had a story about the fact that she'd been in a relationship for a long period of time, got out of the relationship, and wanted to have a fun time as a single person. And she went into work, got in the lift. A guy got in the 3rd floor. They swapped numbers. They both got out of the 6th floor, and they got married. And so she said her period of being single was 2 floors. And she was just really pissed off about it because he's a war correspondent now, I think an ex-war correspondent. She's like an ex-model and stand-up comedian. They've got an unrelatable life. But the show, the angle of the show being, look at what I missed out on, is a very relatable angle. And as a material generation thing, she could then talk about all these type of hypothetical examples or real examples of things that she couldn't do because she was happily in a relationship. So material generation is often thinking, I don't know, okay, Hugh, what are the sort of 3 or 4 things you really care about or really interested in? Where do you have a strong opinion? Are there sort of specific and unique things to you? What's in your background that might be particularly interesting? Are there particular facts that are relevant to you or speak to you? And so there's a guy, Adam Brace, who's a comedy director and was phenomenal. He's no longer around, but he directed some of the best comedy shows that have existed. And he called... he directed a lot of Ahir Shah's shows. He directed shows by Alex Edelman. He directed lots of shit theatre shows. And shit theatre, I think, are the best art comedy theatre group in the UK by a mile.
Shit theatre shows.
Shit theatre.
Right,
yeah.
Hang on a minute. Can we take 2 minutes and explain?
SH exclamation mark T theatre. Louise and Becca. The first time I met Louise and Becca, I was in an improv group with them for a while. That we were awful. They were great, but the whole group was terrible. The first time I met them was on a street near to Waverley Station in Edinburgh. They had a flyer to promote their show. The flyer was very badly photocopied. It was tiny, and it said, "Live from New York," which is what Saturday Night Live introduces itself with. So live from New York. And then it had the name of the show. They hadn't put the venue on the flyer. They hadn't put the time on the flyer. And instead of actually having performed in New York, they'd just taken a holiday there and then put it on the flyer. And I was like, these people are amazing. And then I went to see the show with a friend, and they were unbelievably good. And they're doing the Soho Theatre for about a month, which is a big, brilliant venue in Soho in London. They had a show at the Fringe, which was phenomenal, and they're just incredibly talented. But he worked with them. Becca was his partner, and he directed their shows. So yeah, he was great. But he called comedy directing, hardcore dramaturgy. Dramaturgy being the art in theatre of like asking questions about a piece and maybe helping to defend the writer's vision. So dramaturgy would be me saying something like, "Okay, Hugh, we're going to build you a comedy show. It's going to be an hour long. Let's talk about the fact that you're Welsh. Siarad Cymraeg?"
Good.
Okay. So what's your attachment to?
Yeah.
What's your attachment to Cardiff?
I'm zero apart from I was born there. Place
Okay.
the shit out.
There you go. So Hugh Keir, where I was born is a shithole. It's not a bad, that's a good title for a
The only
show.
thing Welsh about it is it's in Wales. It's the same as any other city in the UK.
Okay,
Right.
so then you tour it to
Students.
North Wales, and they love that opinion because they probably agree with it, right? So then you've got an angle for your show, and then you're starting to think, what else do I want to talk about? You know, did you play rugby at school? Was it not a rugby playing school? I don't know. I know that Cardiff breaks down to that. What took you into the army in the first place? What's an embarrassing thing you've been up to? Is there something that you live your life by that's a mantra, however big, however small? So you start thinking about those kind of questions, and maybe you do what I did with Ellie Taylor, which is conduct a biographical exercise where you're just like, bullet point 3 or 4 pages of stuff that's happened to you. Like the example I always use is that when I was 8, I was the captain of my football team. Everyone else was 9 years old. I have a 6-year-old child. I'm still genuinely very proud of the fact that I was the captain of the under-10s. And that's pathetic, right? But I really am. So that kind of thing, like outsized pride about a small thing, or like less pride than, the kind of person, I think famously Hugh Laurie, found out that did you know this story? His dad was a rower, and he went upstairs when his dad was about 65 years old, when he was a kid, relatively young. He went upstairs into the loft in the attic, went through like some box, and in the box there was a sock. In the sock there was a gold medal. and it turned out to be an Olympic gold medal. Hugh Laurie's dad had won the Olympic gold medal, one of the Olympic gold medals for rowing, and had never mentioned it.
Oh my God.
Mad, right? Absolutely mad. There's a show.
Yeah.
How do you measure up to that, irrespective of anything else? You know, you can become House. Did you win an Olympic gold medal and then not mention it to anybody? No. Okay, sure. You can keep your House, Hugh Laurie. Hugh Laurie being a personal hero of mine.
Yeah. I am jealous of you being an 8-year-old captain of a 9-year-old team. That's not a small thing.
I know. Thank you, mate.
It makes sense that you'd be proud of it. It makes total sense.
I was a powerful central defender, mate. I had a commanding approach to the game. A level of vision. Simon Rogers on the left, very strong. Fair play to him. Lovely stuff.
I got some horror stories as memories. I got a very recent one, and it is horrific. And so I got invited to play. I started playing rugby again about 4 or 5 years ago, and I got invited to play rugby for it was a testimonial match for a very well-known Welsh rugby player called James Hook.
Oh wow!
Wales, yeah.
You played in Hookie, James Hook's?
I played in Hookie's testimony. Right, yeah, exactly. And it was in my hometown of Neath.
Yeah.
Where I grew up near there. I grew up in the valleys near there and played there. And it was in the Knoll in Neath, an extremely famous ground. And James Hook, he sold out the tickets. It was like huge. And I was playing against him. So he was playing for his invitational. I was playing on the Classic Lions. And inside me was Dylan Armitage, and the captain was Phil Vickery. Yeah, and I was on the wing. And a very, very long story short, I started cramping up. Extreme cramp when I went on into the first half. I tell you, who was managing the subs was Ken Owens. Ken Owens, who was injured at the time for Wales, he was managing the subs.
That's
you ready?
ridiculous.
You ready? Yeah, I'm ready, mate. Get me on. So we got on, and long story short, I put in one big hit. I got absolutely smashed by one of the centres on the opposite side, and smashed where they made a meme out of it. The Classic Lion made a meme out of it later on and put it on, like, walking into Monday, like, and it's me getting crunched.
Oh wow!
But Dylan Armitage outside me we're heading down. We've got the ball sprinting down. I got open. We're on the halfway line. It's open in front of me. The fullback's on that side, and all I got to do is get the ball and score. And Dylan Armitage fires this ball at me, and there's 5,000 people in the crowd. Lots of my old school friends and lots of people who know me. I get fired the ball from them. Dylan Armitage, a fucking rocket, bounces straight off my fingertips. It's open, straight off my fingertips, bang onto the floor.
Mate!
He snapped. Fucking hell! I was like, oh my god, this is the most embarrassing thing. My dad was in the crowd. My missus was in the crowd. My mother was in the crowd. All the people, there's some, when you're growing up, there's some people you just want to stick, when you get further in life, and you think, yeah, I'm doing all right now. Stuff those idiots
100%.
Who bullied me. I was the ginger weird kid, right, with a Scottish father and Irish mother, who just has a weird, horrendous social skills. Stuff them. Yeah, I'm playing at the Knoll. Yeah, and then I dunked the ball on and in front of everyone. Oh my god. No one spoke to me. It was a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Yeah, horrific. So I get it. The 8-year-old captain of a 9-year-old team, I get it. It could be worse.
There's a thing that is phenomenal. That's a phenomenal. There's a thing in comedy where, like, no one wants to hear the time that you did a gig to 3,500 people and they loved it. Everyone's here for 4. You drove for 9 hours to 4 people and they hated you and they booed you off stage. Like, that story's so great. And you can make a connection to absolutely anybody, because we can all imagine being exactly that situation.
I hate thinking about it.
I
hate thinking about it. Literally, when someone brings it up, it breaks me. My stomach turns.
Oh my!
It's that. Yeah, you go. It was my moment of greatness, because it's like one thing to play in the testimonial. It's a second thing entirely to score.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I could have scored.
Yeah.
And I did exact opposite. I fucked it right up. Terrible. Anyway, have you bombed?
Have I bombed in comedy?
What's your most memorable bombing? Band.
So my friend Ben...
Hypothetically, because obviously you teach it, you've never bombed.
Oh no, I definitely tell them that I bombed. Definitely, I'm not going to... Yeah. There was a band, and they had a song.
You were in a band?
I wasn't in a band, no. Right. There was a band, and they had a song, and the song went like... da 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 da, and it was like a big hit for a while. And they, I'll remember the name of the band, but they'd sold out the Islington Academy, which is like 700, 800 people.
Vitellis?
No, but they were sort of like them. And our friend was their manager, which was just a guy who was lovely, but he sort of hung around with them. He wasn't really their manager. And he said to my friend Ben, do you want to open for them? Because they'd seen Ben do stand-up comedy. And Ben's comedy, he would dress up in like a sort of pink outfit. He'd like put foam all over the place. Contextually, it was really funny and really good. But not if you've not come for that. And not if this person's just wandered on stage.
So is this a comedy stand-up act opening for a band?
Exactly.
Unusual.
Yes, unusual and bad. Like a definitely bad idea.
But they were doing it because they liked him and thought this would be a great idea.
Yeah, but they didn't let the crowd know that he was going to be there. And in Ben's show, my job was to be the hype man. So I'd walk on stage and I'd say, please adjust your mental filters for something a bit different, a bit beautiful. Please welcome to stage Ben Target, which sort of set the tone for, if you're expecting comedy, this will be a bit different. And that's really important in comedy, to like set a tone so you either break it or you lean into it, but they know what they're going to get, or they know what they think they're going to get. That's great. It works in a show. But in a music venue, to an audience expecting a band with just some guy wandering on stage being like, please adjust your mental filters for the thing you didn't expect you were going to get. Comedy coming at you. And just by walking on stage to 750 people, I disappointed every single one of them. And I was on stage for probably no more than about a minute.
Why? Because you were just so terrible at getting them going.
My job was to be the hype person. So I was introducing Ben, basically. I was emceeing Ben.
So, but was it because you were hyping? You were set up to hype for a comedy crowd, and they were not a comedy crowd. So was it your fault you bombed, or was it their fault?
What I realised was, it was definitely a mixture of faults.
Blame the crowd. It's their fault. We bombed. 5,000 people's fault, yeah.
I think what I did realise after about a minute, I said, please adjust your mental filters for something brilliant and something different. And I just saw people turning away because they knew it wasn't the band. They didn't know what it was, but they knew it wasn't the band. And then I kind of burbled a bit. And then I realised what I needed to say, which was, the band absolutely love the next performer. Please welcome to the stage, Ben Target. At which point he walked on, and that bought him about 3 minutes. He then, and he'd say this himself, wasn't the band, and therefore they didn't really want him to be there. But that 50 to 60 seconds of standing there with people just ostentatiously looking at me and being like, oh, fucking hell, what is this? God. Felt like forever and was horrible. And also, because I hadn't thought it through, didn't realise the context and didn't realise I didn't realise anything. I thought I'd just walk on stage and they'd be like, yeah! And that did not happen.
No, because you're not the thing they're expecting to see.
Yes, very much not. And in fact, I'm introducing a thing they do not want to see. They don't want to see me, and they don't want to see the person I'm here to introduce.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you know, again, since I interviewed Joshua, he's sort of getting a little insight into a thing that you don't otherwise know about. You start thinking a little bit more about, how this is done and how that's done. And this is interesting. You start thinking more about it as opposed to how it's making you feel.
Yeah.
And I went to, I think it was my second ever time, the first time was this year, and the second time was this year, going to a comedy club.
Cool.
And watching, it was just different acts getting up, it was for an hour or whatever, it was an hour and a half. And it was the second one I went to was on a boat. It was in London, on a boat somewhere.
Was it called the Boat Club on the Thames?
Maybe in the Boat Club on the Thames, maybe on the boat, yeah. Downstairs.
Near to Embankment, yeah.
Yeah. And we went there, and anyway, long story short, one of the comedians came on, and he wasn't received very well at all.
Sure.
And he was making a lot of jokes. His stuff was funny, but the audience felt incredibly awkward and were not responding to it. Because a lot of the stuff he was saying, he made a lot of jokes, and I mean a lot of jokes in whatever it was, a 10, 15 minute set he had. But, do you know what? He may have been the final act. He may have been the final one. He had 20 or 25 minutes. And a lot of them were about, it was homophobic stuff, or about or gay culture, right? And it was nothing extreme. It was normal playing on the gay stereotype. But what the crowd knew that he didn't, I assume he didn't, because he kept carrying on with it, was there was a gay family in there. There was a mother, a father, a son, and the son's husband.
Uh-huh.
And 3 comedians before that had come out when the comedian was interacting with the crowd.
Got it.
You go, okay. And he'd been joking about it like that. But when the last gay came out, and didn't appear to know this and started really going to town, I felt awkward.
Yeah.
My missus felt awkward. Awkward for them. You go, oh, God. Because some of it was a bit, it was pretty graphic descriptions of, it was jokes about, how gay people have sex, for example. And you've got the mother and father sitting there.
Yeah.
And you've got the son with the new husband sitting there.
Yeah.
Man. And I felt bad for them. I also felt bad for the comedian. I think he cannot know this. Or he does, and he's got nothing to switch to.
Yeah.
Like, how do you switch your set? How do you switch fire in the middle of it? Unless
I'm sure it would be
super talented and got like oodles of material you can pull out of the back of your mind from somewhere and try and spin it round. Even then, I reckon the most talented would have a hard job. But that was it's a really interesting moment. I think it's like you don't know what the crowd, you don't necessarily what the crowd are after or where they're from or what sort of the makeup, the demographic's going to be that makes them up until you walk in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you think comedians, or do you know if comedians, experienced comedians will go and look at things like ticket sales and try and work out the kind of audience they've got coming, ratios of men to women, types of names to indicate background, religion, cultures, things like that, or not? I feel like it's something I would do. It would make sense.
It's possible. I think because you would probably be interested in the first 3 rows, and so it might make sense to look at the first 1, 2, or 3 rows who booked in, because really, if you're going to interact with the audience, they're the people you're going to speak to. If you're thinking about the larger demographic, like, you would hope that most comedians would have the skill set to be able to win over a crowd almost irrespective of what that crowd is. And maybe they would argue they don't want to know if it's going to be a crowd that's kind of very negative toward them in some particular way. But when you were saying the person who was doing that material at the boat show, there's no way they would have known, I think, because if they were closing the show, they would definitely have enough material to switch out of that. And it surprises me that someone would do that kind of material anyway, but they would have enough material to change it up if they wanted to. So there's no way I think they would know. And normally what you do is you get, like, the MC will say, the crowd is like this, or we've spoken to this person, or this has happened.
The show was, I can't think of the language, but the show was, this is what's it, not shocking. It's controversial, it's touchy topics.
Okay.
The show was that.
There we go. Okay, that might be it. Right. So in that case, all the comedians are encouraged to do that kind of thing. I don't have an answer for you, but normally, almost all comedians will have more material than they're doing on stage, unless they're very early on in their career, and they will have, like, I can go to this, this, and this. And in fact, I worked with somebody on their Live at the Apollo set, and they had, which was recorded like 2 weeks ago tonight, and they had 3 different alternatives to one joke, dependent on how it went. And that's, a set that's been run through a lot, but they knew, if it goes like this, I do this. If it goes a bit better than this, I do this. If it goes really, really well, then I do this plus an extra joke.
What's your thought on that subject? What's your thoughts on comedians delivering material that is written by other people? Because that is a new phenomenon to me. I didn't realise that there were comedians there, from comedians on TV, Saturday Night Live, for example, or comedians who are doing bog standard stand-up, doing their own stand-up. I didn't realise that there were comedians that other people are writing their material and they're just delivering it.
Well, I think most comedians, the comedians that have writers have to be successful enough to be able to afford to pay writers, basically. And the reason they have writers normally is they're being asked to produce a huge volume of stuff. So if you're doing an international tour and a couple of TV shows, or maybe you're appearing in a movie or whatever, plus you've got a podcast, plus blah, 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 you probably don't have time to produce all the stuff you want for maybe the TV show. So I think it's reasonable.
TV shows are a bit different.
Okay.
Well, I know, because Saturday Night Live would fall into that category, right?
Saturday Night Live, they have a whole team of writers, and very few of the performers write all that much now. They did maybe at the start.
What about stand-up comedians who do it?
Stand-up comedians have writers? I guess it depends to
Is it common?
Is it common? I think it depends at what level. I'm not aware of all that many new or very, very famous people who have kind of writers. Often there'll be people who might have 1 or 2 people who will help them shape things. So it depends what you mean by writing. Like writing the whole show for someone is not a thing that I'm aware of. It's possible, but I'm not aware of it, and I've been working it for a while. However, maybe going to somebody and saying, here are 3 or 4 ideas that don't work for my voice. If I talk about football all the time and I've got some jokes about, I don't know, the political climate in Australia, then maybe I go to an Australian comedian who does political material and I say, here are some jokes, because I could never use them. So that kind of stuff happens if it's amongst friends. And then there are people who will kind of help an individual punch up their jokes or work on their script together. But I think the art of comedy is it in your voice? And it's rare that, like when I direct shows, it's often about helping somebody find their voice or helping think through what's involved in making it all feel coherent. And yes, there are writers who contribute in some ways, but it's rarely to the kind of stand-up itself. It's more to, so-and-so is going to be in a film, and so they need co-writers for the film, or so-and-so is going to do a big TV show, and so they need a whole bunch of writers because they just can't, if you're doing topical material every week and you need to do 10 minutes, that's a lot of jokes. You're going to struggle. Anybody's going to struggle to write 10 minutes of really good jokes on topical material every week without a whole bunch of help, I would say. But are there people who help in the background of for comedians? Yes. Do they write the whole of the show? I'm not aware of that.
It's interesting that, having jokes that you got that don't work for you, you wouldn't be able to deliver them well or in the wrong place, for example. You would sell them on to others. I kind of accept that, but it doesn't, I want to believe that someone who's standing up making me laugh has formed all that stuff themselves. It's come from their brain. It's like it makes it more genuine in my mind. But then maybe that's just naivety in terms of what's achievable and what's not.
Well, I think a way to look at it is often that people who do support performers might come to them with here are 5 or 6 comedic ideas. Here are 5 or 6 premises. The premise might be, hey, Hugh, let's talk about that rugby thing, and and here are 5 jokes on them. And then you might think, okay, these 2 are funny, and I'll polish it and I'll add the final touch. And so it does feel like it's your voice. But it might be helpful for you to hear 3 or 4 different opinions. Or if you're setting up this channel, if you're figuring out how to, go and do a corporate speech about it and how you're doing a corporate speech about your podcast, and what it's like to be interviewing people on a daily basis, maybe you'd speak to somebody who's also interviewed lots of people, or somebody who's been interviewed a lot, or someone who understands both the military and mental health and has listened to lots of similar types of podcasts, so they can throw ideas at you for it. You would probably put the finishing touches and you would deliver it in your own voice, but they're contributing in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Thanks, you.
The rest of what you said is dog shit. Okay, question from Coke.
Hello, Coke.
He is still there. He's loitering in the background. He's making notes. He's going to tell you after. Talking shit on.
But he disagreed with you.
Most difficult part of your comedy career? What was it? Or is it?
I worked with somebody on a show. That person I really like. The show was a really good concept, and the show was really good in January. Edinburgh Fringe is August. They then got an immense career break, which meant that they basically weren't in the UK and weren't able to work on their show for 6 months. That career break paid for them to put a deposit down on the house, and the show was in a great place. In early July, they then came back to the show and I went to see it, and they'd not been able to work on it. And they didn't really realise at that point, I think, that everyone else had done 6 months of work on their shows. So the shows that they'd been working alongside in January were at a different level then. And I remember getting to the end of August, and I wrote an email but didn't send it to this person, just saying it's going to be tough to get this show to where either of us would want it to be, because you've not got the time now. And the idea of the show is quite a big idea, and you just can't turn up and throw jokes at it. You need a narrative arc and a structure to it for it to work. I didn't send that email, and that's an email I would now send, because I'm now more confident. I can say, in my experience with blah, 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 this is too short a period of time for you to be able to do justice to this brilliant idea. And I remember getting to the end of August, the end of the Fringe, basically, and that person saying, well, this hasn't been a great Fringe, in a more direct way. And I felt bad about that. But I also, what I didn't say to them was actually, it could have been way worse, but both of us working really hard on this for a couple of weeks meant that instead of it being a thing that people were just like, this is terrible, they were just like, well, this is okay. And sometimes it's okay to be okay if you've just bought yourself a house. But I don't think the person realised that that was the trade-off for them. And I think now they do. And we're still mates. And we're still like, that show could have been one of the best shows ever. It would have taken 4 months of their time. And they had a month.
Why can't you revisit it? Why can't you do that 4 months work?
Well, you could. I mean, you could, but it's less impactful to take a show on tour or to take it back to the Fringe if it's had, a middling impact in the first instance. Would you go and see a thing that had been okay the first time, the second time round? It's probably better from the performance perspective and probably for my own to sort of sit down and come up with another idea, spend the time properly now that they've got a nice house and they don't have to worry about certain things, and then be like, right, now I'm going to spend 7 months on the next one and get it done properly, which is basically what they ended up doing.
Do you ever get people come to you to learn from you in how to be more personable, how to be more attractive to other people, either opposite sex or same sex, or be more likable? There you go. So I'm asking, more likable. So not necessarily to be stand-up comedians or to write comedy or whatever, but literally to improve themselves or their perception of themselves because they think that people don't like them or they have no friends, or I don't know.
I think that happens a little bit. It's not something that I advertise that I do, but I've ended up doing it, and I've been directly asked to do it a few times by people I've met in other contexts. I think knowing how you come across to people, which comedy can really help you learn, and thinking about that. If your thing is that you are the least funny person in the world, and if you can find a way of making that funny by just being like, I'm not funny all the time, right? If you know that, you can be funny. And sometimes people, if they do sort of basic exercises around comedic persona, can make themselves funny, and maybe being funny is attractive to some people. I think I'd feel weird if someone came to me and was like, how do I make myself more attractive? Because if I knew, I'd be all over that. I'm not sure, I'm not sure that there's a way of fostering.
Secret sauce.
Yeah, exactly. First, genetics. But so I don't know, but I've done a bit, maybe a reasonable amount of kind of corporate work where I work with teams about how you bond and how you use comedy as a tool in maybe developing instant friendships or selling or new kind of corporate semiotics basically as well. So I've worked across those different areas, and it's been really interesting to me. One person who brought me into a big legal firm sent a lovely email and was just like, I learned so much from that, like 2.5 hours. My colleagues all loved it. We still talk about it now. It's really brilliant. Oh, just to let you know, I realized afterwards that the thing that had been stopping me doing well in interviews was the way I came across sort of somewhat accidentally. And once I figured that out, I applied for another job and left the firm. And so they were sending it to me on their gardening leave and gave a really lovely quote. And there was a guy, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, I think, a guy called Pete Brewer, who at one point ran one of the world's biggest hedge funds, and it was a hedge fund focused on weather derivatives. He's a lovely guy and he's become a friend. And he took the course.
Weather derivatives?
Yeah, so derivatives being like the paper version of a physical product. So oil derivatives or grain derivatives or whatever it might be. Weather derivatives were essentially a way of finding how you bet on what the weather's going to be like in 3 months or 2 months or a month or whatever. I'm sure you know all this stuff. And so what he did in his hedge fund was he had better weather forecasters than other people and better tools to look at how you would measure the weather. And they also found certain indicators as to what the second order impacts of certain weather events might be. So if it's particularly colder in Siberia, outside of the sanctions that are on Russia, and then the grain that comes out of Siberia regularly, there's going to be less grain. And so your first order impact is the grain is impacted. Your second order impact is if Weetabix buy their grain from there, they're going to have to pay a higher cost because there's less of it. So his hedge fund did that, and he came into the course, and he said that it saved his marriage. So that was a very, very nice thing. He's also the world apple throwing champion of 2012. Yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah. So there are people where it's had either an indirect impact or where I have in teams talked to them about how you nuance it and how you speak to it. I wouldn't feel comfortable setting myself up as someone who could, like, I don't know, make you more attractive.
You're basically Hitch. That's what you are. Remember that? Remember Hitch?
I'm not sure Will Smith is a look I want to go for right now.
The white bespectacled version. White bespectacled version,
yeah. Pre-Oscars maybe, but also, I do think though that maybe having a bit of self-knowledge, which comedy gives you, and an opportunity to be more confident in how you come across is really helpful. And then there are basic tools around resilience that comedians use all the time. Like there's a very, very famous one. Sarah Millican, the Geordie Newcastleian comedian, Geordie comedian. She came up with a rule called Millican's Law, where if you have a gig the night before that goes really well, you can celebrate until 11 a.m. If it goes really badly, you can feel shit about yourself until 11 a.m. the next day. After that, you have to move on with your life. But you have to rigorously implement it. And a lot of people have taken that law and implemented it both in comedy and outside of it. I can celebrate for a while, I'm a legend, but then I carry on with my life. And what that does is it kind of regulates stuff, right? And there are other people. There's a comedian who sort of reframed failing at gigs as a scientific experiment. So what she'd do is she'd look at her watch after the gig had finished and time how long it would take her to feel better about herself. And so instead of being like, I've just failed, she'd be like, oh, I'm a scientist. I feel terrible now. Maybe it's going to take an hour to feel better. And then she'd start timing it. And so suddenly it's a scientific experiment rather than you feeling awful about yourself.
I can tell you after a rugby match, it takes about 3 years. It takes 3 years. It's an ongoing experiment. Getting loads of data.
No,
Peaks and troughs. Should we take a break?
Great.
We're an hour in. 5 minutes and then come back to it. Coke, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Oh, God. Ready? You ready?
Sorry.
Yeah. Right, we're back. We're gonna kick off with we're gonna kick back off, I should say, with a really light-hearted question from our platinum patron on live stream, Coke.
Okay. Hope you're doing all right, mate.
UK comedian Nish Kumar said on the podcast Pod Save the World, there are still people in comedy who are the subject of open secrets that can't be named because of potential lawsuits. And people in comedy will say we don't send young women into their dressing rooms. dressing rooms. Do you agree, and what do you think should be done to ensure safety in UK comedy?
It's very difficult to answer that question because comedy is an unregulated industry. So there is really a kind of whispering. There is a tradition of maybe, I think, amongst female and female identifying comedians, letting each other know about people or places they should be careful around. There are WhatsApp groups and all kinds of things. And I think from the perspective of a co-owner of a venue, then we have a pretty stringent booking policy. And we are, I think, very careful and we're sensible. And if something comes to light, then we will take action. But one thing I learned, I was on the founding body, the Live Comedy Association, which was set up during the pandemic to fight for comedy to get funding, for venues to get funding, because the Department of Culture, DCMS, felt that comedy wasn't an art form and therefore the venues didn't need funding. And so we fought for it and we got it. But during the time that I was in that group, I learned a lot more about the wider comedy industry, because I live in a place where I direct shows, I teach things. I'm rarely made aware of, let's say, because I think we probably, without talking specifics, but let's say there's someone called Bustle Rand, hypothetically, and I wasn't made aware of any behaviour by Bustle Rand and his Winky Dinky, but I think there were expose on TV about that person, and
accusations are a difficult topic, right? So this comes back into the question. Well, accusations are a difficult topic,
right?
Not a difficult topic, difficult decision. My argument would be if you could, say, right, if you had to nail down and say, I need to decide the policy that we're going to stick by for the future. On it could, let's take the podcast for example.
Yeah.
Invite someone on the podcast that was invited on, and I invite someone on the podcast. And in between me inviting them on and actually having them on, in that space of time, there are accusations against them to do with X, Y, or Z crime. If I had to have a policy on that, I think my policy would be I would not change the programming unless there was a charge brought about. I think if I had to have a policy, if I had to choose between one or the other.
And what if the charge is fraud?
What if the charge is...
So what if they're accused of and are then charged with fraud?
If they're charged before I have them on the show.
So is any charge at all?
Yeah.
What if it's...
fraud.
What if it's a parking misdemeanor?
Good question. I think, yeah, it's good. I think it's a bar you got... But is a parking misdemeanor a crime? Is it criminal?
Okay. In that case, the lowest criminal offence, which might be like stealing something from a shop. If one of your guests is caught stealing a thing from a shop, then taken to court for it, so it is a criminal offence, what judgment... Do you then apply that rule?
It's a great point. So maybe what about, and we're playing with this in a minute to see what the holes are. What about if you say, okay, sex-related offences?
And so that's if they're accused of and charged with, but you don't know yet whether they're guilty or not?
If they're charged with. So
charged is...
Because it's back to the, will I not have someone on because they committed a crime for, I don't know, smashing up a wheelie bin?
So
it's difficult, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's why I'm much preferring asking you questions.
Ooh. And then, but what about historical stuff? So let's look at the example of a comedian or a performer or any person in the public eye who has accusations thrown at them about behaviour for something they may or may not have. Or in fact, let's say it's a charge to do something from, I don't know, 20 years ago when they were a drug addict with severe mental health issues. And now they're a reformed person.
Maybe
Does
they've
that still
converted
mean
to
they're
Christianity.
cancelable or not?
Maybe they've ostentatiously converted to Christianity and are currently putting that on all their social media channels.
Oh, is that the case? Okay.
Is that maybe? I don't know. So sorry, the hypothetical is if someone did something...
Is it?
No, a policy we've adopted within the venue is there are lots of people involved in the decision-making process. Predominantly they're female, and they are tied into a lot of the networks where that kind of information is available, which isn't to say that they'd be aware of everything, but it's to say they'd have a high chance of being aware of the majority of things.
How would you validate accusations, even if they're en masse in those examples? Because
I think it's about there being a large amount of those accusations existing. That's
easy to achieve, though, if the person is very well known and very and is very well known and is seen as quite a divisive, polarizing character.
Well, there are lots of divisive, polarizing characters who don't have a large amount of people suggesting that they've been sexually inappropriate.
True, yeah, maybe I'm not trying to defend
Yeah.
XYZ person. I'm just going through it. True, but maybe because their personality or their character would not lend itself to being easily targetable with that kind of accusation.
What's an example of some? What examples?
What? Oh, okay, well, if you try, for example, I was going to say Bruce Forsyth there. Is he still alive?
I hope so. I don't know.
No, he's gone, isn't he?
I don't
He's
know.
gone. Bruce Forsyth's an example.
Was there dodgy stuff around Bruce Forsyth?
No, but I'm saying it'd be very
Okay.
if it was brought about, if accusations, if you wanted to try and smear him.
Which I don't.
No, if someone wanted to try and smear him, and lots of
Right.
people know, I mean, you could whip up enough people to say there's a handful of people to say, hey, Bruce Forsyth tried this on or touched me or X, Y, or Z. I love Bruce Forsyth, by the way.
Okay. So you think 3 or 4 people,
it
or
would
5 or
have-
6 people would come forward to just say a thing that wasn't at all true? Because how would that conversation arise?
Well, the point is that it wouldn't go very well against Bruce Forsyth
But how
because
would
his
it
character
occur?
is so opposite to what you would expect.
Oh, right.
Whereas a character,
If their persona, it makes it more believable.
yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. Or if, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It's more stickable. And if the person is prone to expressing views that go against the accepted, I don't want to say narrative, wrong word, but that is deemed very polarizing, like views on, I don't know, transgenderism, views on vaccinations, and these things. Again, really bad accusations. I've got no idea, by the way, about the person alleged. I think it just makes it more stickable. I think it's much easier to come up with bullshit and make it stick than otherwise.
But if someone doesn't
I'm not saying that's the
believe,
case here, by the way.
but if someone doesn't believe in COVID, it doesn't lead to there being inappropriate.
No, I think it's highly likely that that a hypothetical person in the past was not always the greatest human being when it came to anything at all, be that a friend or be that a sexual partner or be that a fucking human being. But yeah, what was the point I was making? I think it's very easy these days to whip up a frenzy against someone which is not necessarily founded in honesty and integrity.
I don't know, but I do think it would be difficult to find 5 or 6 or 7 people, or 10 or 12, or in the case of Trump, 50, 60 people who've got credible accusations of sexual misconduct, with all of those people feeling that they just don't like his politics. That may play into it, but let's take him as an example. He's been repeatedly taken to court for very substantial, proved with evidence, sexual misconduct. I can't imagine a world where someone thinks, I mean, it's possible, I'm sure it has happened, but where a multiplicity of people think we don't like someone's views on COVID and therefore we're going to go to the police and accuse them of sexual misconduct.
True. Yeah. But if you dislike someone, and there's enough of a...
If you dislike someone, surely there are other ways of making them look not great. It's a very lengthy, emotionally draining, arguably expensive process to go through all that stuff. You run the risk of losing your anonymity, and emotionally it must just destroy people if they haven't already from the experience.
I think especially on the US side of the water, I think because they've got that sort of litigation lawsuit culture over there. I think it makes it a lot easier I think people are a lot more prone than here, for example, to exaggerate on something or bring about some nonsense because they know there's much higher likelihood of getting a direct payout from someone to keep things on down low. My point on this was not to defend anyone we're talking about. My point on this was to go back to the thought of the idea of cancelling someone because of accusations or not, or you get to the charge point. It's extremely complicated. Extremely complicated. You can't. It's like you almost can't have a blanket policy, can you? It just needs to be a case by case basis, I think.
Yes. I would say that I know Nish Kumar, that I really like him, that he's a person of huge integrity, and it is known within comedy that he's probably done as many, if not more, gigs for charity without shouting about it than basically anyone I know in comedy. I'd run at the Edinburgh Fringe. I ran an annual thing for Robin Williams, it was called, on the anniversary of him committing suicide, and Nish would host it every year. Didn't ever ask for payment. The money went to a mental health charity in Scotland and the UK, to Mind and to SAMD, and I ran stuff for Choose Love, which is a refugee-focused charity. It started in 2016 and became the biggest funder of refugee camps globally. And Nish got on board very quickly, and hosted an awful lot of stuff for them, and and was involved in most of the comedy events I ran. And he never shouts about it really, and I think that speaks to somebody's integrity.
Let's go on to something lighter, but not that much lighter. Another question from Coke. This is not my fault. Okay, is there any creative work you think crosses a line and should be changed or removed? For example, changes have been made to Roald Dahl books.
Yeah.
Well, I think Coke posted a link earlier where France had rejected the change. I think it's France, isn't it? But yeah, so
Roald Dahl was noticeably anti-Semitic. There's a play on at the Royal Court at the moment, I think, called Giant, which sort of addresses that. So I think that
creative work you think crosses a line and should be changed or removed? Is there any creative work you think crosses a line and should be changed or removed? So existing creative work.
I mean, I am sure that there are works of art that address, in a way that is now not appropriate, a wide array of discussions around ethnicity, around political discussions. I think, do I have a list of things that should be changed? No. Would I like occasionally, having seen or read or listened to, etc., something, to be able to say, well, that's not okay? Yes. I'm not going to name it, but I watched something fairly recently, which is a new version of an old thing, and I felt there was one joke in there that relied very heavily on a cultural assumption / trope that could be argued to be close to racist, and I was surprised that was still part of the show now. And my first comment was that should go, along with some other thoughts. I don't know that I should be given that power because I've got a lot of stuff going on. Should we as a society look at it? Should it be, have you seen Blazing Saddles?
Amazingly funny film.
Amazingly funny.
Yeah.
I wonder, amazingly funny. I think there are, I think there might be some questions here that are above my pay grade, to be honest.
Okay, I understand that. I don't like changing things like that, and I also don't like when so Little Britain is an example.
Okay.
But Matt Lucas and David Williams, I think they both came out and apologised. And Matt Lucas certainly did. Made some big apology, and said something like, "It should never have been made. We should never have done that."
He was referring to specific sketches within Little Britain.
Yeah, probably one would be the biggest gay in the village, and there's probably a couple of others, But I didn't like that. And the reason I didn't like that is because I think it's a perfectly acceptable position to take, is that, well, that was acceptable at the time. And it was socially acceptable at the time. And we wouldn't make it now. But at the time, it wasn't seen as doing anything wrong.
By who?
By them making it.
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles is another example.
But isn't a point that even at the time there might have been a gay person in Wales whose life was made harder by the existence of that particular sketch?
Yeah, quite possibly.
And maybe Matt Lucas has been more in touch with those people subsequent to it becoming popular and has become aware of the damage that it might have done to that hypothetical individual. And maybe if he'd have known in the first instance, given the quality of the writing in that show, they had the ability to create something else that probably might not have had that impact and still be funny. No,
I get it. But okay, so this must be something you've definitely come across in a conversation before. Now, as if that's the line to take, then any comedy that risks offending someone should not be allowed.
No, I don't think that's the logical thing. Okay. I think that, maybe a way to look at it is, what is the joke on you? Maybe a rule I try and apply in courses is to say, if that person was in front of you right now, would you change what you're saying? If you're making a joke about X or Y, if that person was in front of you and you'd still say it, maybe because you found if you are the bigger idiot than somebody, then the joke is on you. So that's a way around it comedically, maybe. It's a really, really good question. How would you approach it? You wouldn't change anything? Because I think
look at it now. We know it's not socially acceptable to say the N-word unless you are of a particular skin colour or particular background, potentially, or a particular culture, right? Because not acceptable. But it doesn't mean that jokes which play on the stereotype of people of certain skin, of any skin colour, there's stereotypes about white people, right? It doesn't mean that they're not acceptable in comedy.
I guess it depends what the stereotype is. And I guess there are two different types of stereotypes. There's positive stereotypes and negative stereotypes. If your stereotype is you're Welsh and from Cardiff, and let's say you're faster at running than anybody, if that's the stereotype, that feels like a reasonably positive stereotype. There are issues around that as well, but that's a relatively positive stereotype. If the stereotype is something that's wholly negative about you, then that's maybe a different stereotype to build comedy around, because what you're doing then is reinforcing a negative thing rather than talking about a positive.
It depends how you're bringing it up. If you look at the way Frankie Boyle does stuff, he'll bring up a negative stereotype and he'll bring it up as a part of his comedy, but in doing so, he's highlighting the ridiculousness of it.
What's an example of that?
I don't know. I'd have to go and have a look.
I also can't think of an example as well.
I think Gervais does the same thing, right? He'll one-liner stuff, which is just a ridiculous comment, like. Frankie Boyle's definitely done it with disabilities. And, Frankie Boyle's made jokes about Katie Price's son, right?
Yes, that he has disavowed subsequently, that, as far as I'm aware. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's definitely gone on record and said, I wouldn't make that joke now. Specifically that joke.
Okay.
No.
Moving on. Jesus Christ. Okay, there are many UK comedians. This is again from Coke. There are many UK comedians with Knoxbridge background, e.g., Jimmy Carr, Sacha Baron Cohen, Rowan Atkinson, etc. Why do you think this is? Tell me. This is an easy one. You can't avoid this one.
Oxbridge background, I guess. There's a tradition in both universities of comedy, and that tradition reinforces itself. I think there is a sad thing that both universities, maybe Cambridge more than Oxford, have up until probably 20, 25 years ago, just produced an awful lot of people that then went into the comedy industry, and the comedy industry was quite small. So you hear stories about Douglas Adams leaving the Cambridge Comedy Club, and then 2 years later, his old mate from the Cambridge Comedy Club calling him up and saying stuff like, "Do you want to come and work at Radio 4?"
Douglas Adams, the writer of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Wow. And all those books, yeah.
In all those books, yeah. Brilliant, genius, incredible. What was his quote about deadlines? I love deadlines. I love the sound they make as they whoosh by, which I think is really good. So so there's a lot. I think it was people who knew people. It was the old boys network, essentially. You'd seen someone at the age of 18, 19 write some good sketches. They'd got into the comedy group, or were a part of the comedy group. You were then looking for people to be in your to write for your show, and they're the people you'd go to because you'd know them and you think they were funny, possibly. And also they were bastions of, white male privilege, I guess. So Peter Cook was also, Dudley Moore was Oxford, Peter Cook Cambridge. They met, Peter Cook took a show to the Edinburgh Fringe with a bunch of other very talented people that did very well. And in the next 5 or 6 years, he made his reputation at university. And in the next 5 or 6 years, he got incredible opportunities off the back, arguably, of the connections that he made through going to the Fringe and being at that university. And that was a kind of common story. He was uncommonly talented, but it was a typical story for very good, often very good people. But I don't know that they looked very far for alternates for a very long time. And then it became a prophecy that just kind of continued. We always get comedic people from this place, so we keep going to this place. If they say Saturday Night Live, they get people from 2 places. They get them from the Harvard Lampoon for the writers, and they get them from improv clubs in Chicago. And that's been the case for a very long time. It's less so now, but it was for a very long time. If you've got a pool of talent and you're lazy, maybe you go to the places that it's always come from. It's not good, and it's...
Maybe go to a place where...
those people have always come from.
Well, if they're getting the talent from that place, why look elsewhere?
Well, I guess that's part of their thought. Just to be clear, I haven't been part of that decision-making process, but I imagine that's what happened in the 60s, 70s and 80s when British comedy was astonishingly dominated, particularly by people from the Cambridge Comedy Club.
Yeah. Okay.
Society as a whole has changed, and that is less significant now, to the point that people from those comedy clubs now, when they graduate, probably don't make a big deal out of it, whereas maybe in the 60s or 70s, that's what they would have been shouting about. And it's good that there are more diverse voices. Obviously, it's vital and important.
Yeah, and there's more equality of opportunity, for sure.
There isn't a total equality of opportunity, but there's definitely more.
Where's it lacking?
Where's it lacking? I think that minority representation in comedy is getting better, but I wonder if I was a talented, non-white TV director or TV producer or wannabe TV director or wannabe producer in comedy, I wonder how many role models I might have in the UK, at least. And there's that old phrase, like, what you can't be, what you can't see.
So the amount of role models there are does not impact the opportunity you have. They're 2 different things.
But isn't there that phrase, you can't see what you can't see, it's difficult to be? So if you're not aware of someone who looks like you or sounds like you, who's done that thing before, and I'm not these things, but if someone was from a particular background, a particular ethnicity, and didn't have somebody who was at least seemingly similar to them to ask advice from, to Sherpa their career, I wonder if that makes it harder, maybe?
It doesn't take away the opportunities there. And who you're willing and not willing to go and ask advice for is down to who you are and not who is willing to give you advice and not.
That's true, but if you go and ask advice with somebody and you don't have a kind of commonality with them, then it's maybe harder to understand their experience. If their experience, for example, is I got recruited in the BBC at 1982 because I was part of the Cambridge Comedy Club, and your experience is very much not that, and you're not the same ethnicity, and you're saying to them, what should I do in your career? They might well say to you, well, go to Cambridge in 1982. Like, that's what worked for them. So it's a different, it's different. You know, I do think that being able to see someone like you, whatever that looks like, doing a similar thing is incredibly impactful.
Yeah. But I don't think that impacts the opportunity there is. It may impact the likelihood of you succeeding because of a bunch of different factors, like your willingness to engage and take information on and I don't know, integrate into the community in whichever way you're going in, whatever it is, as well as from the outside looking in, this person is different, and the willingness of them to help engage and support, right? But that is, I think that's not unique to like a skin color or a culture. That's just human beings looking at things being different. As long as the opportunity is there for someone to try, and they have the opportunity to try and do something, then they'll face the same challenges anyone else does. Obviously, different in different industries and different anything you want to achieve in life, be that a profession or whatever.
But if you start an interview and somebody's very similar to you,
yeah,
you've got a foundational place to have a conversation from. If they're very different from you, maybe if they say to you, "What's your favorite comedy?" and you reference 3 different things on TikTok, and they don't have TikTok because they're not of that generation, I wonder if that conversation goes the same as someone saying, "What's your favorite comedy?" and you saying, "I don't know, X or Y," and it happens to be very similar to them because you're from very similar backgrounds. Yeah. Maybe that conversation goes differently. And maybe if you don't have examples to look to, maybe no one can tell you that actually what people are looking for in a specific interview isn't this, it's this. Mm-hmm. So when someone says to you, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" the correct answer is in your job in 5 years, because that shows determination and drive. Or that's the worst possible answer because people might get threatened. And different organizational hierarchies will like one version of that more than the other. And if someone can tell you that, you shortcut that interview. If someone can't tell you that, you don't. And I think you have to have a shared lingua franca in order to be able to do that, arguably. No one's going to say to you, the shorthand version of this answer, random person I've just had a coffee with and have no bond with or reason to tell this to, is X, I would imagine. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Where are we? How would you feel if your son wanted to enter the creative world?
How would I what? If my son did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'd be delighted for him.
You'd be delighted for him?
Yeah.
The creative world is quite a wide scope there. The creative world. Would you prefer to do stand-up or write?
Anything he wants.
Anything.
As long as he loves the thing. One thing my dad used to say, and I don't know if he meant it, but it had a real impact on me, was, if you want to be a bin man, just be the best bin man you can. I'll be delighted, right? I think there's a lot of, so whatever the thing is, if he finds a thing he cares about, I just don't care what it is because I think it brings you a lot of joy. You've got 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. Same question for you. Would you like them to go into the army? How would you feel about that?
If that's what they really wanted to do, and I thought they would enjoy doing it, and they were doing it for the right reasons, as in they want to do it, not solely because they think I would want them to do it.
Yeah.
And
what about creative industries? Worse or better than the army?
Ooh. Creative industry, worse or better?
The army?
They're not comparable. They're not comparable.
Well, the army, there's obviously a risk, massive, but there's regular pay, there's the camaraderie, blah, 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 blah. The creative industries, arguably, very significant kind of precarity of payment and regular income and all that sort of stuff. You're going to spend years establishing yourself, probably getting very, very low income. So there are they're quite different models.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I would look at it from are they going to enjoy it? They want to go and do something they're motivated to do and enjoy doing. Because one side, they're more likely to succeed, and 2, they're more likely to be satisfied generally, even if it's going pear-shaped. If they really want to do it, they really want to try. But yeah, I think I prefer the army. To your point, because the creative industry is such a wild ride. Same as I wouldn't want them to go and do anything like that was like contract based or sort of like sales based. I did a quite, what's the year was it? Nah, probably 6 months as you ever done anything sales?
Yes.
Oh my god! I did business to business stuff, door to door, into businesses,
wow.
trying to sell a product for another business.
Can you say what the product was?
It was virtual tours, video tours, right?
That sounds like a nightmare.
I was not having a good time in my life at the point, and got this job, in inverted commas, job. And it was a fucking pyramid scheme. And I would go in and sell this thing. And basic go in, and I'd sit in the business and say, got a photographer coming next week in this area. And we'll come and do a virtual tour. It'll go on your Google profile and, great for your business and all the rest of it.
Right.
But what I couldn't handle was the rejection rate.
Yeah.
In order to try and meet what, to get money, you got paid. It was a commission only. There was no like base. It was just commission. And it was a 6-week delay on the commission too. So yeah, 6-week delay. And in order to try and hit a minimum amount of money that you need to survive on, like acceptable wage, whatever that was at the time, 1,500 quid, 1,800 quid, whatever it was deemed acceptable, right, generally, you needed to hit on a daily basis 120 businesses. That is so you do the high streets, into the door, pitch out, into the door, pitch out. And out of those 120, you would expect to secure 4 or 5. And what I couldn't handle was rejection.
Yeah.
Because I'm a very confident individual now. I like to think anything I'm interested in doing and motivated into doing, I'm going to be really good at it. Right? Yeah. This is what, my confident head, it's literally how I think.
Right.
Now, you go into that job with that mindset, and 95%, well, it's more higher than that, 97, 98% of people you're trying to convert into sales are saying, no. It was soul destroying. It was soul destroying. I could not work out how people do it for a living.
Yeah.
I could not. Now, granted, that was particularly soul destroying with that the volume we were doing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But even then, doing it anything like that, just, oh my God, no, thank you. Takes a different kind of person to be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
Different kind of person. Creative industry is similar, right?
I mean, you get a lot of rejection.
Create a sketch show. Write a book. Write an article.
I feel for you. I don't understand how you lasted 6 months.
What did you do?
I did professional indemnity insurance. So
fucking Cambridge.
So it was. I mean, it wasn't. So it was a summer job.
And me on my clipboard selling fucking photography.
So it was like calling solicitors firms, and they have to get this insurance every year. But the insurance is more expensive if you had claims against you. And solicitors firms don't want to say to a random person, "Hi, we've just been charged with 7 different really dodgy things that we've done." So the conversations were kind of, I know that you might be paying quite a lot for your current insurance. Code for, you've screwed up a lot. I know that, you know that, but nobody at your firm, not everybody at your firm is going to admit that. So you have this weird intro call with people, and then you'd have to try and sell it to them. And then the way we were told to sell it to them was to say things like, "I'm just going into the Lloyd's brokerage," which is the big Lloyd's building. "I'm going to speak to an underwriter and price it up for you," which is not what would actually happen. What would happen is we would be told by one broker, who mostly would be in the pub, "This is the price." But we would be told to say to people, "We've only got 2 hours. We've got a 2-hour window on this decision. Your insurance is going to be £13,000. And I was like, I want to tell you that price is not going to change. But what would happen, I found out subsequently, is the brokerage, the company I work for, would get the prices of all the insurance from all the different places that might insure this risk, and then they would give 2, and they'd give 2 to me. But there would be 8 prices, and one might be £8,000, one might be 13, all the rest of them might be 15. And so they'd give a 15 and a 13, they'd knock out the 8 and just not offer it. But because they'd have got quoted, nobody else would be able to take that quote. So the whole system was so rigged. And it was weird because these people would think you knew what you were talking about. And they'd be like, "Oh, so and this covers like certain areas of our risk in a whatever way. And I'd be like, well, yes, from what I can tell, but I'm not an expert in reading your policy. And you'd sometimes be reading you'd be speaking to really old solicitors who'd had some really sad things happen or had been responsible for big mistakes. And they would find it difficult to tell you, a random person over the phone, what they needed to tell you. And that was just horrible. I was there for 3 months. And I remember on my final day, a bunch of us going out, and I got more smashed than I'd been almost ever before. It was just horrible. And I wasn't even happy to leave. I was just like, the fact that exists in the world makes me sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the worst job you ever had?
No, but my friend Dave, who I love, had a job at McDonald's in Stevenage. He worked there for 4 hours. On hour 4, he messed up an order. His boss said, "You've just messed this up." He called him the C word 18 times, ripped off his McDonald's outfit and threw it at his boss, and then left. And then 2 days later, went back in and said, "I want my 4 hours pay."
Oh my God.
I would have loved to see that. And then be like, "Hi, Dave, you left on what can only be described as a low point." And then being like, "I do want my 4 hours of money right now. You, C word, C word, C word, C word."
What do you think of, I was just thinking there, I'm finally thinking of working while you were talking about McDonald's and work, and then online, I was thinking, I'm trying to explain to you how I got to this, because it's not quite just a random. And then online work, and I was thinking about online comedy. What do you think of the effectiveness of delivering comedy online? So a stand-up sketch online. Is it worthwhile effort to do that if you can, or just not bother? Is there any value to doing it? Because it takes up a lot. I'm just thinking, if you're a comedian or you're a budding comedian, you want to get the road miles in. You want to get stage time in, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And getting stage time is a hugely laborious endeavour. From securing that stage time to getting to the venue, all the hours around doing that. Where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Online is not as effort intensive and time intensive, so you can arguably fit that in around your real stage time and not take up as much of your spare time as it would otherwise. What do you think about it?
It's a great question. I think
I drew it out. It's a great question. I drew it out.
To go back very quickly to the worst job I've ever had, I just remember what it was. It was in Melton Mowbray, working a pet food factory, doing the night shift for 12 hours with a half-hour break, and you would have to pick pallets of pet food, and every 20th pallet of pet food would be mouldy, and you would throw it onto this larger container thing, and the whole pallet would break, and there'd be flies that would be unleashed from the pallet, and they would just fly into your face. And I did that for 6 to 8 weeks, and it was the worst pay per hour I've ever been given. And I reckon 50 times flies from cat and dog food flew into my face, and that was absolutely the most horrible job I've ever had.
I was working in Iraq.
Oh, you can't start like that.
Listen to this. You're gonna fucking love this. I was working in Iraq. And at the time, I was on a oil rig, as a land-based oil rig in Ramada oil fields, and I was a site security manager. And one of our responsibilities, apart from site security, was when visitors came to the oil rig, the site, because the rig is obviously the rig. The site, they would come to my cabin, they would sign in, I give them a safety brief, then they go off and go to see the company man, the boss of the company there, basically the officer in command, so to speak, and at this time, and my guard force was Iraqi guard force, Iraqi logos.
Wow.
Great, but useless. And they could not wrap their head around the way we would want, a guard force executed in a sort of Western ex-military kind of way, right?
Yeah.
And in a similar way, the workers for that oil company, who were, the majority of them were Iraqi, they were not operating in a way that was needed for, a Western oil company, or the standards by which an oil field being managed by, for example, BP would expect standards to be. So they would come visiting regularly.
Right.
And I just long started on this site. The company man is an amazing guy. He was a Filipino guy, but everyone else was like a nightmare. And I remember looking around one day, and next to the petroleum like tanker thing with I don't know why they had petroleum in there for anyway, and next to that is the Iraqi health and safety manager, hard hat on, smoking a cigarette, next to don't smoke around this sign. This was about 20 yards behind my office. Anyway, BP turned up one day, and they come on site, like, yeah, I knew them already. How's it going? Yeah. Come sort of issues. We knew there was issues on that site, like nightmare. Like, where's the health and safety manager? It was pouring down. It was raining.
Right.
Where's the health and safety manager? I'm like, get on the radio, call him. Can't remember what his name was. And don't know. And I look up to the oil derrick, and up the ladder is going an individual with none of the safety equipment on. Should have 2 lines on him going up to the top of the derrick. There's someone else up there, presumably you need to go and talk to him about something. It's the health and safety manager, half of the derrick, like doing nothing he should be doing. I fucking hell, man. And as I say that, and they look up, my guard commander walks in his flip-flops, walks into the office, steps onto the metal step, but because there's a short circuit in my office, which the health and safety manager has not sorted out in the entire time I've been there, steps on, contact with his foot onto the metal step, and gets blown about 20 yards. And the BP guy's like, what in the fuck is going on?
What operation is this?
Welcome to the site. Yeah, I just remember that. They were amusing days. They were very amusing days.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, glad I wasn't under the hook for that. The health and safety manager got sacked when he came back down.
Fair.
Stand-up comedy on Zoom.
That was a great story. Is it worth it? During the pandemic, obviously, there was no alternative. Now, I think anything that allows you to have time running your material is helpful. You can kind of treat Zoom gigs. I encourage people who do the course to maybe get a few of the other people to do the course and to run their sets past them. So even if that's just jump on, don't really worry about their reaction, but just do it. Because often, you running that, to me, if you were going to do it in a speech or something, it's helpful for you to just have it in your head and think about it. And often if it's new material, a story you haven't told before, or jokes that are new to an audience, just running it, you'll be able to feel where the mistakes are, where the holes are, and where the problems with it are. So that can be really useful. Is it a substitute for live comedy? Absolutely not. But if you could do 6 gigs in a night rather than, say, one where you waited in a room for 3 hours to perform for 5 minutes to people who aren't that interested or a very, very small crowd, maybe that is a kind of maximal use of your time. So can they be effective? Yes. Are they the same as live? Absolutely not.
You'd have to gauge you'd have to really like filter out how you assessed what the audience response was like, wouldn't you? Because they're just not going to be as engaged, and you can't tell if they're engaged.
Yeah, you know, I don't think you'd rely on the audience at all. I think you'd video it, and I think you'd watch it back and then make your own
just
determination.
To assess yourself.
Exactly. Or you'd ask a friend to be in the audience who knew comedy.
Oh, sorry.
And they'd do it. Yeah, either way.
Yeah.
But I don't think you'd do it on the audience reaction, because even that kind of clap emoji thing, like that's not a way of measuring comedy.
Yeah,
but you can say, this was delivered well. Like that story you just told, that was phenomenally well told, because you obviously have told that story before, I imagine, quite a few times, and so you know exactly what the beats of that story are. But if you were to do that for the first time, it might be helpful to run it a few times past someone.
Yeah, they're actually 2 separate incidents that I pulled together at that moment.
There you go.
Really, so, all right. Okay. Now, so Dec Coke is asked. We're coming up. We're nearing the end of time.
Okay, great.
Of the podcast, not. Before you end the pod, as a testimonial to what it's like to be taught by Dec, it might be good to share this email I sent to him after my course.
Oh.
With him. Hi, Dec. Here's my late email. I have not read. I've not pre-read this. Right, like the other questions, obviously. Here's my late email that I was meant to send on Friday, but I've taken so long, so I'm so unthankful to you. 1, you're not thanked for being so friendly on the course. 2, you're not thanked for being so generous. You'd give a discount to a student like me and to others who it'd help. I feel like you may not want that publicly. You're not thanked for being willing to give us your time outside of your teaching hours. You're not thanked for being a competent teacher. It makes it much harder to use you as comedy material if you're a good teacher in person. You're not thanked for being a co-founder to a great comedy club from which us and so many others have benefited from. No, Dec, for all these things you are hatefully admired. I'll always remember this course positively, regardless of how my stand-up journey goes. Here's a quote that reminded me of you. They may forget what you said, but they will not forget how you made them feel. Carl Buechner? Buechner. You made us feel good. That's a happy customer. Happy customer.
That's a nice thing for him to say.
That is a nice thing
Thank
to
you,
say.
Coke.
Pulled it back after you had difficult questions. Jesus
Can you
Christ.
solve
He dropped some
society?
grenades in there. And the irony that at the break, off air, we were talking about some depressing stuff. We thought, let's start it again. We'll he just dragged us down more. Is it? Do you think it's possible for anyone to become funny, or there some? And I know you've been asked this before. I'm guessing you have.
Yeah.
Or is it impossible for some?
No, I think either people who ask that question, well, is it possible to become funny? Yes, because all it is an understanding of your persona. I used that example earlier of people who are not fundamentally funny in any way. If you know that, there's a way of applying it that then becomes funny, right? So it's often about a level of self-awareness. There's a German comedian called Henning Wendt who calls himself the German comedy ambassador, who's really, really funny. But he's got a line where he's like, people say Germans don't have a sense of humor. I don't find that funny. Like, that's just a really nice joke playing on a stereotype, right? But he's found out, he's got his persona honed. So if you can figure out what your persona is, you can absolutely make stuff funny. I mean, people talk about 10,000 hours to get good at something. And then they just, and that's kind of, people aren't born with a tennis racket, or they're not born with a violin. You practice. And it's the same with a sense of humor. It's the same with intelligence. If you can take loads of tests, you're better at the Mensa test or whatever it might be, if that's an adequate test of intelligence. And most people might argue that it isn't. So yes, of course you can learn. Is there such a thing as like an innate sense of humor? Of course. Can you be taught to be funny? Yes. Caroline Phillips, who's a journalist, came to do the course, and she's a journalist from the Times.
I've interviewed her.
Have you?
Caroline Phillips. A little bit older than us.
Yeah.
Light hair, but I interviewed her.
Right,
Yeah.
so
What a lovely lady.
She's lovely.
She got really ill after I interviewed her, I think. Or was it just before? Just before. I think they interviewed her because of her illness. But go on, so I'm going to
So she's completely lovely. She came to do the course. She wrote an article on it for the Times, and she said, I think the quote is something. She said something very nice about me. She said I was a genius comedy teacher, and then she said, "You can't teach a sense of humor, but you can teach someone to be funny. Just do the course," which is very nice. And that's not just limited to me. There are other good people who can help you. But yes, you can. Okay.
It's Caroline Wyatt.
Okay.
Sorry. You're welcome on, Caroline Phillips.
Caroline Phillips, contributor to the Sloane Ragers Handbook, and lovely and outrageous and very funny and sort of mid-60s.
Yeah. I think the best thing, one of the best things to do is spend time around funny people.
Yeah.
I've got a friend, a real close friend, and he's ex-military, and when he joined the military and came to my unit, he immediately got marked as someone who's extremely boring and not funny at all.
Okay.
And but because of the way his personality and his mannerisms and that, it was hilarious how unfunny he was.
Yes.
Right.
And he got to learn.
He's developed over time, right, to the point where he is not. He doesn't try to be funny. He is who he is. He's not bothered. He contribute to conversations and stuff. And we did. I don't want to go into the event, but when he drops a one-liner, it's so unexpected that because he's just this, monotone, normal, you don't expect anything hilarious from him. And once every so often, if you're with him for a few hours, within that few hours, he's going to do it 2 or 3 times.
Nice.
He knows exactly what he's doing. He sees the opportunity. He's not searching for an opportunity. He knows when it comes up, and he will drop something in. It can be one word or a few sentences, and it ties in exactly what his persona is. And when he does it, my God, we are crying.
Of
We're
course.
all crying.
Of
all
course.
crying laughing because it's so good. And it's worth him contributing nothing for the entire time. Just for those bits of gold. Just for those bits of gold. It's amazing. But yeah, spend time around funny people, I think. And go and do comedy courses and clubs. How do people follow what you're doing and where you do it?
I'm on Instagram, Dec Munro Comedy, and I teach mostly at the Bill Murray, which is angelcomedy.co.uk/courses. And I have a website, decmunro.com.
There you go. I'm going to quickly check. I don't think Coke's got anything else in the chat. It has been an absolute pleasure. Hope you enjoyed it. And I need to get up. I don't think I've been to your club yet. I said I don't think, though, because I'm so not clued up with the UK comedy. Oh, there was one question from Coke, actually.
Okay.
In the UK, one more question. In the UK, best place to go and see comedy in the UK and best place to go and see comedy globally. Where would you say?
Best place to see comedy in the UK is the Bill Murray Comedy Club in Angel Islington.
Obviously.
No, it is.
okay.
It's won the awards. It's the best. The best place in the world is the Comedy Cellar in New York. Yeah. And if there are other places in the UK that I would watch comedy very happily, the Monkey Barrel in Edinburgh is brilliant. The Soho Theatre in London is fantastic.
The Soho Theatre.
Yes.
Am I right in saying that's a little place where really tight when you're walking on the bottom? I think it's got 2 floors up. The first floor's got a little bar area and then a narrow corridor that goes into a little theatre at the back.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe any of them as little, but yes, you're right. That's exactly where it is. Yeah.
How many seats?
The big room is probably 200, I guess. The downstairs room is 120, maybe, and the upstairs I think is 90. I should know. So there are 3. Downstairs is like cabaret style seating. Big room is raked, and the upstairs room is kind of flat.
Thinking of a different place. Maybe.
But it sounds like you might be describing
I
it.
went there for a psychedelics art fundraiser.
Sure. That doesn't sound like
it
the
was
Soho.
Amazing. There was mushroom paintings everywhere.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was like proper. And I was sober. It was like the best thing ever. Sober as every single one.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was good. It's been a pleasure. I'll put the links to website, the site.
Thanks you.
The venue, I should say, anything else in the blurb, and I will come to the club, mate.
Great
for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Anytime. Be glad to have you. Thanks very much. You.